we're back. What's up, bud?
We're back, man. Oh my God, what's up? What isn't up?
I know you have had, because those of you who have listened before know that we record this a few weeks beforehand, just so we have a few on hold in case one of us goes on a 2-week bender.
Common
Two middle-aged idiots. And Darren D, as we call him here, you've had a big 7-day cycle. You want to tell us what happened the last?
Yeah, and I'm kind of at I'm kind of like halftime right now and it's really no rest for halftime because I was in San Luis Obispo for my son's graduation from Cal Poly. We're recording this on a Tuesday. I flew back on a Sunday and 2 days ago. Yes, to Kansas City with my girlfriend. I hate to call her girlfriend, my life partner. We've been together 4 years. We're practically married. But anyway, so I flew back with her to KC and then drove to Denver. I'm at my house in Denver right now. All sorts of stuff going on today. Tomorrow is the wedding rehearsal. And then Thursday is the actual wedding. My daughter is getting married. And
your daughter, not you and your girlfriend.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't clarify that. That's
both
crazy.
The kids, man, that you're official because one will be married and one's graduated college. No more financial obligations, which means you and I are.
It doesn't end.
No. You and I have to take like a 2-week trip to like Europe together since you have no more financial obligations to your kids.
Well, it's just the beginning, really. Yeah, Annie, that's my better half. She and her kids, which are kind of like my kids now too, they'll be coming out here and they're in the wedding. Walter and Wesley, they're the ring bearers. Emerson's the flower girl. They're from oldest to youngest. It's Walter, Emerson, Wesley. And yeah, it's just a crazy time. But hey, we have an incredible guest. I want to dive right into it, if you'll forgive me, because I don't want to waste this guy's time. He's probably like, who the fuck are these guys just talking smack right now about who knows what? But this guy, speaking of Indiana, when you think of Hoosier, you think of this guy. And for many, many reasons, I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of years ago. No, it's been more than a couple of years ago. God, I guess it's like, I don't know, 12 years ago, 15, I don't even remember. But I was doing a documentary and was able to interview him about some of his work. And when I say the work that he's done, you'll know right away these movies because, and he's continued to make so many more, but two of his many films, he wrote and produced. And when I say produce, this guy is a real producer, like a creative producer and really hands-on. I'm sure I can't imagine one frame of these films would not go untouched by this guy. The two films, Hoosiers and Rudy.
No.
When you think of the greatest sports films ever made, you think of those two.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
They are just impeccable.
I just watched Hoosiers again because when Gene Hackman passed away, I have it on DVD. I had to pop it in,
Right.
You got the guy from Hoosiers? You got Angelo?
Yeah. Absolutely.
No
Angelo
way.
Pizzo. I'm going to bring him out. Angelo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you for being part of this. I'm just so honored. And you are still in Bloomington now, right? You were in Hollywood for years and moved back years ago, and you're there now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been, my journey is full circle. I grew up in Bloomington, went to Indiana University, went to grad school at USC in film, and then stayed out there in the Southern California area for 31 years. And then when my two sons were 8 and 11, my wife at the time and myself decided we didn't want to raise them in, Southern California. We wanted to raise them in a really good college town. And so we moved to Bloomington in 2006.
Well, see,
that's fantastic.
I have no questions about film or anything. All I want to know is Mother Bear's still the best pizza, or is there somewhere else you favor?
I've never been a Mother Bear fan. So You're not going to get me on that bandwagon. I'm definitely, I think there are a couple of places that are better.
Well, you'll have to tell me more about those because I'm moving. I don't know if you overheard our intro, but yeah, I'm kind of doing a similar thing, except for I'm raising my cats. I've been in Denver now for 20 years, but some of my best days obviously were in Bloomington. I graduated in 80 and two. When did I graduate? 92.
92.
Yeah, so Final Four, Calbert Cheney and Company. And
Sure.
yeah, I'm so excited to get back to Bloomington. And you must love living there if you came back.
I do. And, I just, I'm reminded of how much I love being here every time I go back to LA.
Yeah, right.
In fact, I've been there off and on for the last 3 months. And in particular, I was there for 7 weeks finishing up post-production on a movie I shot here in Bloomington in the fall. And I was really happy to get home 2 days ago.
What was the movie?
You want me to tell you about the whole movie?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if it was taking place in Bloomington.
Yeah. I'm jealous I wasn't part of that. Thanks for the call.
Well, listen, it was it was an insane thing that I chose to do. I'm glad I did it. No matter what the outcome is, but I have been carrying around this personal story of mine, a situation that happened to me in my 8th and 9th grade years in Bloomington. That would be 61 and 62. I compressed it to 3 months. And I wrote the script like 12 years ago, kind of as therapy more than anything else. And I just had I had a movie set up and ready to go last fall, and it fell apart. It just opened a window, and I had this really strong sense that the time was right for it, in part because the relationship between this boy and his mother and the boy's new friend kind of blows up the world of everybody. And the mother character does not come across sympathetically, okay, to put it mildly.
Right.
So all my brothers and sisters said, please don't make this while mom is still alive. So she passed 2 years ago, and it was a sign that it was time. And so rather than go and try to raise the money, I decided I was going to take on something I'd never done before. And that was to raise the money independently and do a ultra low budget, not ultra, not in terms of the union ultra, but I tapped friends, family, and I wanted to shoot it in Bloomington. It was really critical. And many of the scenes are shot in exactly the same places where the real incidents happened.
Wow.
It was always a really strong sense that I wanted to do that. Now, if I'd gone to a production company, if I'd gone to somebody else, 2 things would have been gone. One is they would not have let me shoot this in Indiana because there's no tax credit.
Yeah.
And number 2, I would not have any control over casting, or I'd have input, but the people who write the checks can make the calls, as to location and casting and script as well. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it and just take a wild swing at the plate. I can say that I'm very fortunate that I'm financially secure to take any hit that this that takes place. I'm not worried about my career at this point. And I just decided that, I put together a $2.5 million movie.
Good for you.
Friends and family investment, my own investment, and a lot of help from Bloomington people, a lot of locations and cars and wardrobe, a lot of things that just I couldn't have done without them. So
does this take place? What time period is it?
1962.
So it is. Where did you go? Like the Bachelor Middle School or something, or where did you go? No,
in fact, the bulk of the incidents that took place in reality were Binford. It's a grade school, but it used to be Binford. Used to be a junior high school.
I remember it well. Yeah.
7 through 9. So I was there in when it first opened up. Well, it looks almost exactly the same. So we shot all the school scenes there.
Wow.
Yeah. And we shot the football scenes right on that field where I played football. So it was really an interesting experience for me to go back and to recreate a lot of the things that I went through. And there were some, emotionally challenging situations. I'll put it that way.
I'm
Oh
sure.
my God. And, a couple of things with that too, like doing a period piece is always challenging. So it's great that
Really
you
hard. It
explored.
was hard. By the way, I will say categorically, I've been on some really challenging and difficult shoots. Nothing compared to this one.
Really?
Nothing. Oh my God. First of all, I'm used to shooting 40 plus days. Every movie I've been involved with has had 40 plus days. A lot of people think back on Hoosiers and thinking, well, that was a low budget film. For the time it was 6.2 million. But that's 25 billion today.
Yeah.
So, we had 45 days to shoot this thing. I had 21.
Yeah.
And I was working with, let me put it this way. I hate to use the word amateur, inexperienced, very young actors, a lot of local theater people who had never been in a movie. So the heavy lifting was working with the actors to get believable performances and to try to shoot it at the same time and to shoot what normally would take me 2 days into one. So it was one of the most exhausting mentally and physically things I've ever had to do.
I'm sure you had a seasoned first AD though that you brought out to help out.
Yes, I had a very good AD.
Yeah. That can make all the difference too. Having a strong first.
Well, honestly, even more important is my DP.
Yeah,
my DP. If it wasn't for him, I could never have made it. In fact, I went to him at a certain point, having to spend so much time with the actors, as opposed to the film I directed previously, My All American, where I worked with the cameraman all the time. We wrote out detailed shot list, and I mean, it was really smooth because I was working with actors who had deep experience. I never gave a line reading on that film. I was giving line readings all day long on the movie I just finished. And but the DP, I mean, he was a gift from the gods, and someone with extraordinary experience. In fact, the 3 films that he did two films he did before mine were a Kevin Hart $56 million film, a Eddie Murphy, Pete Davidson $70 million movie, and then my puny little $2.5 billion movie.
Is there any? Do you have any big names at all? Like
no. With $2 million to spend, you don't have. There's no money to spend for. There's no money to spend for any kind of name actor.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, that's honestly, with the exception of just a couple of movies that I did, most of the films, especially the first 5 to 10 years of my LA days, 2.8 was like, oh, wow, we actually have a little bit more money this time, and wow, we have 21 days instead of 16. That means we don't have to work 18 hours a day. We only have to work 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that, and I learned more about directing in this movie than I did in the 45 years of making movies.
Yeah.
Just because I had to constantly invent. I mean, I had certain scenes that I needed 5 or 6 hours to shoot them, and I had like an hour.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out how to compress the essence of what every moment was in that scene and how to shoot it and how to get performances in such extraordinarily short time. And that was the way it was all the way through. And the football was really hard too, because, I didn't have really experienced players. I had junior high school kids, and we had old uniforms. It was really hard, but the movie has turned out really well. I think it looks and sounds great. We have a fantastic score. The Larry Groupie did the score, who's done tons of big time films. He teaches in the film composition program here at IU School of Music, and was a friend of mine. So I kind of called in a favor in a way. To mention, Larry Blanford was the DP, and one of the reasons that he took the job was because he grew up in Richmond and is in his 60s, and he remembered that time.
Right.
And he also, said to me, interestingly enough, the films that he has been done, he does all of Pete Segal and Tim Story's movies, every one, which is, quite a list. And he said, doing those movies, I could do them in my sleep. This one really challenges me, really makes me go back to my roots. And, I have to be much more of a challenge, and I have to be much more inventive.
Love that. So what's the plan now? Do you have sales? Are you going a festival route? What's the distribution?
Yeah, well, we're actually having a big Zoom meeting about that on Friday, and we're getting some input on some heavy hitters, and we'll make a plan from that. I mean, you being in the business, there's different ways of going with it, and whether we're going to be represented by, I have a good friend who's a pretty well-known, very successful film sales agent who covers domestic and foreign. And, I also have some interest from some agencies. And then there's the festival route. I'm not really, I'm sort of, it's up to the gods. I mean, I'm very at peace with whatever happens when it goes out into the world.
Having a good sales agent can really make all the difference. And
that's so true.
Yeah.
But again, this is something I've never been involved with. In all the time, every film that I've ever been involved with was made by a studio or production company that had a distribution deal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is like, not an issue.
But my next question was, in Hoosiers, obviously you're a big Indiana basketball fan, as are Darren and myself, but there seems to be a lot of Bob Knight in Gene Hackman's character. And is that the case?
Yes, it is the case. I heard a story about him. Of course, he was iconic, but I was in California at the time. I never knew him, but I've always been a passionate Indiana basketball fan. And he's such a fascinating character. I was trying to create a sense of a backstory for the coach, and why he was sort of end up in this kind of backwater tiny town in Indiana, and he had this experience. And so I knew Coach Knight had a temper, and I could have imagined him punching a player out when he was younger, and then that being the case, never being able to work again, pre-internet, of course, but so I thought that was just the backstory. And then I knew enough about, and I knew I had friends who were on his team who played for him too. And he was famous for, 4 passes before a shot. So I took a lot of his philosophy, his approach to coaching. I knew about it because I read about it, and I also knew about it because I had friends who were on his team. And one of his assistant coaches was a good friend of mine in college. So I was deeply connected, but I'd never met him.
I got just the autograph and the picture Calbert Cheney was a very good friend of mine, and I introduced him to Darren. We actually did a video with him. But yeah, Calbert got that for me. And then Jamal Meeks got the whole team from that year to sign below, those red things they have in all the, restaurants. Every year they have the kind of drawings of the players. I'm going to go grab it in a second to show you, but the whole team signed it except for Bob. And I gave it to my grandpa as a present. But I will tell you something funny, Angelo. I was in the locker room at my health club about maybe a year or so ago, and I said, how are your kids doing? He was like, well, I'm coaching my daughter's, basketball team. And I said, you ought to run the old picket fence. So I told him, and he remembered it from the movie. And of course, it became a joke, like within his 8th grade child's basketball team. Like, are we going to run the old picket fence? I mean, they had, of course, then watched the movie as a team. So I got you a few more bucks probably there.
Yeah, right. I wish it worked that way.
Right.
So I guess I have to tell my Bob Knight story.
Yes.
Got to.
As I said, never met him before the movie came out. But that was a very interesting year, 1987, because Indiana, who was 13.5-point underdogs to UNLV, beat them to go into the national championship game on Monday night, the same night as the Academy Awards. And we were nominated for 2 Academy Awards, and that was Best Supporting Actor and Best Score. And we got tickets, and Jerry Goldsmith and Dennis Hopper and our dates and our wives and so on. We're all ready to go. And I actually didn't think it was going to be a conflict because I didn't think that they would beat UNLV. And I was freaking out because I just could not imagine not watching that game. Remember those Sony Watchmen?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I gave Dennis, he went in for rehearsal and he tried to use it. And there were too much electronics at the Dorothy Chandler where it was. And I got up on Monday morning and I called David Anspaugh. I said, you know what? I can't miss this game. So I'm not going to the Academy Awards. I'm not being nominated.
So and for the listener, David Anspaugh, he's the director for both Rudy and Hoosiers.
So I got a call from the local, a reporter for the Herald Times here, and said, "Oh, I know you're a passionate fan. What are you going to do?" I said, well, "We're gonna have a watch party. We're gonna have two televisions, one for the Academy Awards, one for the game." Well, that was the game in which I missed something. I forgot to tell you was that when Indiana won, the regional championship and went to New Orleans in the Final Four. David and I signed a poster to the Indiana team. This is the year of the Hoosiers.
Yeah.
Okay? And we signed our names and we sent it to Joby Wright, who was our friend from college, who was just assistant coach. And Joby hung it in the locker room. Okay. So in New Orleans.
Wow.
Which was pretty cool. We found out that. And anyway, Keith Smart hit that last second shot to win the national championship, which was well worth, staying home and missing the Oscars. So the next day, and it's framed right behind me. Okay, this up there.
Yeah.
Wow. It says IU wins NCAA crown, and then right below it, right midway through the halfway through is Hoosiers creators stay home, watch it on television rather than go to the account. So,
is that the Herald telephone back there? Is that what?
I think it was still the Herald. Wait a minute. It was the Herald telephone.
Yeah, Herald telephone turned to Herald Times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shot by Keith Smart, that is that such an unforgettable
iconic
buzzer beater win.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those iconic things where they'll still like to this day when they show the NCAA it's like Smart for the win, it's like you hear that, I just got the goosebumps, it's like
so
I got to tell you one other thing.
I'm bringing this up for a specific reason.
Yeah.
The next day or whenever, the day after, Coach Knight was in his office with Joby, and he was reading that paper, and he said, "These guys who sent the poster, you know them?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "No, those are true Indiana fans." He said, next time they're in town, have them come by practice. It was like, that was obviously going to be 6 months from now. And I'd like to meet him. So I happened to be back. It was like to October and the end of October. And I called up Joby. I said, okay, I'm going to come to practice. Well, nights practices were ultra closed. I mean, it was like trying to get in the CIA to get into this. And I mean, there were a couple of international coaches and me, and during the practice, he would look up at me and frown and shake his head, like he didn't like me or he was pissed off at me or something.
Who the hell's this sitting in my assembly hall?
And it was like, doesn't Joby should tell him who I am? Why is he? And then he kept on staring at me and shaking his head.
I can see it.
And I'm thinking, I something's happened. Maybe he saw the movie and didn't like it. He hadn't seen the movie at that point. So that was what I came up with. He did not like the movie, and he was pissed. And so at the end of the practice, I thought, well, I'm not going to go down there because that guy doesn't like me.
Yeah.
And so I headed toward the exit, and a manager pulls me, catches me and said, Coach Knight wants to see you. And I'm thinking, shit, man, is he going to make me do push-ups or something? What did I do? And I was like, the funny thing about him, everybody thinks like Coach Knight is like screaming, yelling all the time. He was actually very calm during that practice. He's very much the teacher. But so it wasn't like he was in a bad mood or anything. Anyway, I get down on the floor. He's talking to somebody else for a long time. I'm seeing there's a very intimidating guy. He's 6'6" and big and has this incredible energy around him. He finally turns around and he sticks his hand out like this. And I reach out to shake him. I think he wants to shake my hand. Nice to meet you, Coach. He slaps my hand away. And his hand is out flat like this. I said, I was like baffled. I don't understand. I don't understand. He said, you owe me money. I said, what for? You owe me money. I'm sorry. I don't understand. That coach and that Hoosiers, that's all my dialogue. That's all my. And then he had a big smile and put his arm around and came on, put his arm around my shoulder. He said, I love the movie. Great job.
Oh man,
that is a great
He was just
story.
messing with me the whole time, and which he loves to do. Anyway, He said, what are you doing right now? I said, I'm going to go home, have dinner with my parents. He said, no, you're not. You're coming with me. We're going to go see a guard in Chicago, south side of Chicago, recruiting. We may need him next year. And so I spent the next 10 hours in conversation with Coach Bob Knight.
No way.
Yeah, we got it was the foundation plane, and we ended up flying there to Chicago. And he didn't like the kid after all. And it was we went to an Olive Garden. We're the only white people there. And the power of Bob Knight was like the old E.F. Hutton commercials.
Yes.
You walk in the place, dead. It was like really noisy. And when we walked in, dead silence. And I don't think it was because of him. And he had just come over, and I mean, had just coached the national championship, team.
Yeah.
And people lined up and asked for his autograph. He was really, really nice to them too.
That's great to hear.
It was an extraordinarily fascinating conversation. And from that time on, I would go on a road trip with the team every year. And when I come back, we'd have, lunch or dinner and got to be good friends with him until he ended up going to Texas Tech.
Wow. What a great experience.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so cool.
Tom, a little trivia here too, something that Angelo has. I don't want to spoil it here, but there's a little physical piece of history that you have from the assembly hall, right? Turn to a desk.
Yes. My desk is
No way.
Oh my God. Okay. For our
No
listen,
way.
3 national championships have been won on my desk.
Holy shit. Okay. For our listening audience, there is a video component to this too that comes out a week after this. So you got to watch that so you can see what Angelo just showed. But Angelo, can you describe it?
Yeah, you describe it. I'm going to go show you the difference between what you have and what I have.
Yeah, so I got to know I got to know somebody who was head of the marketing, merchandising at Assembly Hall, and he was selling these little. I think he's going to come out with one of these little slabs, right?
Right.
And that was his job, is to sell these little slabs here left and right. And I said,
Are you talking about these things?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
That's right. Yes.
Tom just held up like a 6-inch piece of the floor.
Yes.
So he said, I said to him, is it like endless? How much of the stuff do you have? How many pieces they have? Well, they swap out their floor every 20, 25 years. And he came and he showed me in the storage area all these slabs of 4x8 sections of the floor that they cut up, and sell as needed. And I thought, God, I'm just redoing a house. That would make it. I just thought of a desk, how great that would be as a desk. I said, what would it take? How much would it cost me to buy 2 4x8 sections? And he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he thought about it. I'll let you know. He called me about a week later. And he said, I have an idea. If you do a favor for me, I'll give them to you. And the favor we did was we had a signing session of the new 20th anniversary DVD of Hoosiers. And we ended up signing at halftime and after the game, and he had 4,000 of them and sold out. And my hand about dropped off, but
wow.
It was an extraordinary amount of a signing.
Oh my God! And the pieces that you have, they're just not any pieces. They have the Indiana logo on them.
Yeah.
So
there's an I, there's an I and A. There's an I on one. There's an A on the middle section, and then there's part of an N on the other section.
Well, this was the thing that I was telling you at the Jamal Meeks had.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, every year they have that. They may not have it this year because they have a brand new team.
Right.
And I'll tell you another funny story. This guy right here, Lawrence Funderburk, when he left Indiana and quit, he was staying at my apartment for a few nights.
Oh, that's funny.
He decided. I mean, I didn't know him real well. We became friends later, but he was an interesting guy, man.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy. Tremendously talented.
Oh yeah, and he wore number 52 in the NBA because that's where he got picked after getting drafted, and he wanted to wear that number to make to remember. Oh, 51. I mean 51.
Yeah.
And now a word from our sponsor. Do you need a voiceover? Need a voice that turns heads and sells your story, or makes your explainer video actually fun to listen to? Say hello to Fry on the Fly Productions, the audio playground of Tom Fry, Voice Arts Award winner, veteran actor, writer, musician, and certified man of 1,000 voices. No, really, the Denver Post said it, so it's got to be true. It's basically law. And you know what? It's also the very same Tom that's here on the Tom and D podcast. Not me, the other guy. He's not as cool, but he's got a better voice. Tom's been doing this for over 25 years, which means you've definitely heard him somewhere. Maybe hawking Arby's, or narrating your favorite documentary, or doing a dead-on celebrity impression that made you wonder, wait a minute, is Morgan Freeman selling lottery tickets now? From national commercials to network TV, stage to screenplays, Tom has done it all. And then he built a state-of-the-art audio production facility to do it even better. So, you need a voiceover with that pro-grade polish, or a script that sings, or a song that slaps? Fry on the Fly brings that full creative package from mic to final mix. So if you're looking for a top-tier voice talent, expert audio production, or someone who can actually slip into about 12 different accents over lunch, Fry on the Fly is your guy. So just drop him a line at tom@fryonthefly.com. He probably already sounds like someone you trust. And back to the show. Shifting gears to, I'm sure you've told this story a million times. You told it to me. I would love for you to, if you don't mind, to tell the story about Hoosiers and that first time that you wrote the script and you shared it with somebody and got feedback.
Well, to put this in context, to tell the whole story, that it has some sort of meaning to it. You know, it wasn't a random person who read the script. I'll just go back to, and not do my whole bio, but do a brief summary of my bio. When I went to USC, it was really to get a degree, a doctorate in film studies. It was an academic approach, and I was not interested, nor did I think I was capable of trying to fight the battle of being a filmmaker. There was like an internship at the last season of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and I got to know Grant Tinker, who was the president and Mary's husband, and he and I became a mentor of sorts, and convinced me to think about being involved in the process of the support system of filmmaking, that is development, executive, so on. And he got me an interview with this guy who he and I just hit it off, and he said, I want you to be my assistant, and your job is to learn everybody else's job on this entire machine.
Wow.
And all the training. And he would take me into film, music spotting sessions, the editing room, casting, so on and so forth. I spent a lot of time in the writer's room, and on the set as well. He trained me. He really trained me to be a filmmaker, and it was an extraordinary gift. And he had a vision for me to become like president of ABC, honestly. And because the person right before me was president of CBS, he was kind of a megalomaniac in that way, and. So the next job he got me was, I got a job at Warner Brothers in development, and I did 6 years of development, and I ended up being, director of development of Movies of the Week and miniseries, and then moving into the feature film area. Worked for various companies. End up with a company called Time Life Films when they were actively making films. It was a great job. I worked with some great directors, writers, actors, so on. Learned a tremendous amount about how to make films, produce films, and ultimately to write films. Although I never really wanted to write, but when I was there, at the president of the company asked me if I had any pet projects, and I said I always wanted to do a movie about high school basketball in Indiana, and he said, well, find a writer. So I called my agents up and that I worked with and asked for writing samples from people from Indiana. I wanted somebody to do, I didn't want to see Breaking Away. Breaking Away was a film that was successful, but it was not accurate to the people who live here in Bloomington.
Totally agree. Yeah. Right.
But it was a great script, and the script got an Academy Award, and deservedly so. Got to know the screenwriter, Steve Tessich, wonderful guy. And I said, the casting was so weird. I said, I don't recognize any of those people. And he said, those aren't Southern Indiana people, and they're not university people either. He said, yeah, well, the guy who directed the film had never heard of the state of Indiana when he took the job. So I read a bunch of samples, nothing worked out. I had this notion that I worked with so many writers. I read so many scripts. I always wondered what it was like to write my own script. So I decided to take a chance, and I wrote. It was a terrible experience, by the way. I won't go into the. It was. Let me put it this way. I went and did the research on the film, and then put it together. And to avoid writing, you can research forever. And I kind of like diddled around in Indiana. And I just drove around looking at gyms. It was a weird time. Then my parents had a summer cabin up in Lake Michigan, and I went up there, and I was like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. It was like all work and no play make Jack a dull boy. It was a disaster. So I came back with 10 pages and I hated them. So I decided not to do it. And then I got a good friend of mine had just, was offered a deal at Paramount to do series and television movies. And he brought me in as a partner. And so I made a deal there. And I ran into one of the people who was so important to my life. He was a guy who he he was the showrunner and creator of the first series I worked with. And he always thought I had the writer's sensibility because I was in writer's room and I was talking about various things. And he said, "Why don't you write one of these things?" And I kept on saying, "No, I'm not a writer." And I told him that, I saw him at the commissary at Paramount, and I said, I tried to write it and I couldn't do it. And he said, "What do you mean you couldn't do it?" I said, I everything I wrote was terrible. Well, I said, "Who said it was terrible? You said it was terrible, right?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And he said, "You probably don't want to do this, but you know that what's going to kill you every time." And for anybody listening to this podcast who actually has any aspirations of being a screenwriter, who is a writer and struggles and so on and so forth, this is the one key piece of advice that made me become a writer. And that is, he said, especially working the muscle of your left brain or right brain, whatever, that rational, linear, objective, critical grid, it's going to kill you every time when you read your own material. You'll be brutal, and you can't be objective about your own work anyway. He said, "You should try the Nabokov method." I said, "What's that?" He said, Vladimir Nabokov sat down and started writing, and he never read a single thing that he wrote until he got to the end. So he didn't have that critic on his shoulder. And then when he got to the end, he said, "Okay, somebody else wrote that. I'm going to come back at it from a different angle." And I sat down, I thought about it for like a month or so. And then I sat down and I wrote Hoosiers, like 190 pages Hoosiers in about, it was about 6 weeks. And I never reread a single word that I wrote. Now, parenthetically, I've written close to 50 scripts since then. I use the same method because that critic on your shoulder never goes away.
That is such good advice.
Yeah. And I finish every script. I make mental notes of things that change and evolve, and I know I'll have to change, but I don't go back and change them,
Right.
And so I write the script as one person. And then, or I describe it this way: I write from my neck chakras down, and then I rewrite or I edit from the chakras up. So I developed that skill by working in development for 6 years. So I'm good at that, but the writing part's always hard. Anyway, so I took that script, and the person who gave me my original job, the guy who was my mentor, who said, "I'm going to make you a filmmaker," I told him that I was writing the script, and he thought it was a terrible idea, because I was on a track, to become, his president of ABC. And by the way, I was hired as an assistant to the president of ABC. He got me that job, and the president actually died in a plane crash 1 month after I took the job. So I went off and did something else. That was 2 or 3 years into my development time. But I decided I was going to give him the script, the first person to read it. And when I don't care, I can say the same thing about the movie I just made. I have no idea if it's any good or not. Okay. I don't know if any script I've ever written is any good or not. I don't trust people who say, "Oh, I just wrote a script. I nailed it." How would they know? It's like, I think it's really good. Well, you can never make that judgment on your own work. So, my heart was in my mouth when I handed it to him. And he was the one who called me up and he said, I don't think there's a single scene in this entire movie that really works. And he said, yeah, I don't think the characters are developed. He said,
Were you just devastated to hear
I was
that?
beyond devastated. He said, Angelo, you just wasted a lot of your own time. Just you need to be a development executive. You need to be,
my God. Right.
you're great at that. Just don't even think about writing again. So I took that script and I threw it in the back of my closet. I was devastated. My girlfriend at the time, pulled it out and read it and said, it's not bad. It's pretty good, whatever. And she tried to make me feel, but you can't get any read from someone who's your friend or family member either. They're not going to, they don't want to hurt your feelings. And so it sat there. And as I said, I was back at work and developing. I was like producing a pilot, and I went to a dinner party, and I met this guy. His name was Scott Berg, and his brother was running ICM at the time, and Jeff Berg, and his dad was a producer, and his dream at that time. He was a biographer, and he had written his doctoral thesis, I think, was on Maxwell Perkins, who was the editor of Tom Wolfe and Fitzgerald Hemingway. And he had just finished a book on Sam Goldwyn, and he was working on a book on Charles Lindbergh, for which he won a Pulitzer Prize, by the way. And he's a brilliant writer. And we ended up talking for a long time, and he said, you kind of have a sensibility of a writer. Have you ever written anything? Then I said, I tried. It was a failure. And he said, what happened? And he said, and I told him the whole story. And he said, you gave one person the power to determine whether your script was any good or not. I said, yes, but that guy is incredibly smart. And he's also, he cares about me. And number three, he really stated everything I feared that was going on in my script. And so ultimately, this guy, Scott Berg, said, well, I want to read it. I said, well, no, it's too embarrassing. It's bad. And he said, you cannot let one person tell you whether a script is good or bad. He happened to know this guy. And he said, this he doesn't have shades of gray. Everything is the best or the worst. Okay. And I actually turned him down, and I coincidentally ran into him at a party like a couple of weeks later. He said, do you want me to come over and stand on your doorstep until you give me the script? I said, okay. And so I gave him the script, and he called me, the next day, and he said, there's one hell of a movie in here. It just needs to be edited. And actually, everything in the script everything that was in that long first draft is in the movie. Every single scene. Right. I didn't rewrite, hardly anything.
You just took out what didn't work.
I just cut, and he helped me. He was really critical in shaping. And he gave me a piece of advice that I read about and heard about before, but it's another piece of advice. Again, if anybody's listening, it's a personal preference and a point of view. And that is point of view. I had written everybody's story. I was like all over the road. I was like, Buddy and his cheerleader, one of the players and their cheerleaders. I was telling multiple stories. And he said, the more you pick a point of view and tell the story from one person's experience, one person's journey, you will be able to engage the audience more and better because you will experience what they do. And, and it's sort of like the coach is a stranger in a strange land. And you can bring the audience in and see and experience everything he does. And so when he feels despair, he feels joy, he feels, a sense of satisfaction or success, so will the audience. But if you're hopping around, then not everybody's going to care about Buddy and his cheerleader girlfriend. Okay. They're not, and maybe they're a cute little sideline, but we're not, all of a sudden the whole energy of being on this journey with one character will dissipate. And I've written probably out of the 50 or so script, I've only violated that 2 or 3 times. My protagonist is in every scene in the movie, almost every script. That is not, I can't tell you how many scripts I read where that is not the case.
Yeah.
And people can point out a lot of movies that are successful where that's not the case. But from my journey, which is to create emotional moments in the end of the movie or the middle of the movie, if it works, it's critical. If you're doing a comedy or an action, piece or a horror thing, it doesn't really matter so much. But, for straight dramas, I think given the time constraints of 2 hours, I think taking a single point of view is really critical.
Absolutely. And also these huge themes or these ideas, like it's not just about this coach that, goes to this small town and works with these players and, wins a championship. You may disagree with us, but to me, it's about second chances. It's about having this opportunity to right a wrong in your own past and make things right. It's these big ideas when somebody has lived a life, any sort of life, they've experienced that themselves, and they're like, "Wow, this connects on a big emotional basis."
There have been, I can't tell you how many people have mentioned that, a movie about second chances or what Hoosiers is really about. Article after article. I mean, people did 1,000 interviews and so on and so forth. And I always say this. I know looking back on what the thematic through lines are, but I did not have them in mind when I wrote it. I wrote this strictly from my gut. I didn't write from my head. I think when you start to write thematically, you think about a theme, I think you can bury it. I think you can have the spine of your piece in the back of your mind, but you got to write from your feeling state. The feeling state is the characters are going to help guide you. That's why I'm very much against outlines. Outlines are the death of really organic storytelling because they don't allow the characters to grow, evolve, and develop in ways that you can't know unless you start giving them voices.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, that's like the opposite of the save the cat method. If you know, if you're familiar.
I don't read any books about screenwriting. I don't. Yeah. Every screenwriter I've ever known who I admire, who I have great admiration for, has never taken a screenwriting class. I think you either got it or you don't got it. I think you got it if you fall in love with movies and know how to speak in movie language. But I'm not a fan of screenwriting teaching. In fact, I get this a lot. Someone says to me, "Oh, listen, would you talk to my daughter? She just got in USC in the screenwriting program." And I went, "Oh shit!" I don't have anything to say to her.
Right.
But except what I have to say to you: don't do it. It's a waste of money. Because I truly believe this. I could take anybody who really has a passion and interest, and in one afternoon, I could tell them everything they need to know.
Yeah.
And then they have to find their own voice and they have to find their own stories.
And do it. And
I
do
have
it
two
over again.
I have 2 questions. The first one was about, you said that first time where you wrote all the way through without looking back at all. When you came, and I don't want to use Hoosiers as an example because obviously your heart was, thrown in the back of the closet with that screenplay. But once you started writing your third, your fourth, and then you would read it and come back to it, did you like it? I mean, and say, yeah, this works, or were you still, insecure about that?
Well, I was able to create, I always took time off between finishing the script and going back and reading it, unless I was on a deadline. And I would say out of the I say I've written 40. Okay, I can look at it this way. I've written 4 scripts on spec and probably 44 for hire. So the ones on hire, I usually am late, and so I have to reread them fast. But if I do have the time, I take a break and I come back to it. And as I mentioned, it's almost like I'm reading somebody else's script, and I'm back to being a development executive. And it's not even a question of because I know what my intentions are. I know what I'm going for, and I just have to make sure when I'm rereading that script and editing it that I'm supporting my goals and my intentions, and let the chips fall where they may. So it's not necessarily like, well, I mean, there are times where this scene sucks, or what a bad piece of dialogue. Yeah, I mean, but I fix it and then move on. I don't beat myself up about it. But, after doing it for as long as I have a pretty good feel, if the story is flowing, and part of what's really helpful in not rereading and rewriting as you go is you get a sense of pace, you get a sense of narrative, you get a sense of flow. And if you stop and start and you're always going back and forth and going between your left brain and right brain, you don't get that. And so it's really critical for me, and especially after having probably read 1,000 screenplays before I wrote one, the one failure in 90+% of the scripts that did not work was lack of narrative. Lack of narrative momentum, lack of narrative flow, and at the same time, an inability to create a rooting interest for the protagonist. So it really comes down to, do I want to turn this page? Do I want to know what happens next? Do I care what happens next? And, that's what can't be taught. I mean, you can teach somebody to write the perfect model script, but everybody has their standards of what that Robert McKee, God, I that guy has been the bane of my existence. Robert McKee is, and he teaches his screenwriting workshops, and like every studio executive during the 80s and 90s and aughts went to them, and they came back with all his verbiage to give me notes on my scripts. And it was like, oh my God, these screenwriting teachers, they just get in the heads of the executives and they give them tools by which to torture me.
Yeah.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Got a podcast that needs producing? Especially one with a video side hustle? Then you need 224 Media, the brains and the experience behind this very podcast, plus a whole bunch of others featuring some of the biggest names in healthcare, entertainment, and other binge-worthy stuff to listen to and to watch. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh great, a shameless self-plug, you're right, but also wrong. Because this isn't just filler until a sponsor swoops in. Those sponsors, our DMs are open. It's a heads up that 224 Media doesn't just crank out top-tier podcasts. We're also behind slick commercials, compelling video packages, TV pilots, and award-winning documentaries. Basically, if it involves a camera and creativity, we're in. So if you're looking to make something awesome and maybe have a little fun doing it, 224 Media is your go-to. We've got the experience, the talent, and just enough caffeine to make magic happen. Go to 224media.com. Spelled just like it sounds. TWO24media.com. That's TWO, the number 2, the number 4, MEDIA.com.
And back to the show.
Okay, so I do have a quick follow-up, and this can just be a 1 or 2 word answer, but then I have my next question. Was my mom, who was a previous guest, is writing her first. She did her first book, which was nonfiction, and then now she's writing her first fiction book, and she keeps on going back and and rewriting before she's finished. Do you think that would you give that same advice to a person who's writing a novel?
Let me say a couple things about that. I can say I don't know because not everybody subscribes to my theory. Not everybody uses my theory, and I know successful writers who use outlines. and work and rework as they go. And I've never written a novel, so I wouldn't know. If I'm guessing, my sense is if I were to write a novel, I'd write it the same way as I write the screenplays. I would not go back and forth.
Well, I think she'll find this interesting when she listens to this because, like I said, I'm like, Mom, she's like, well, I rewrote the first couple. I'm like, Mom, you're never gonna finish this.
Well, Angelo, we've taken up so much of your time.
Yes, we have.
I cannot thank you enough for being so generous to just be a part of this and to just let everyone share and all of your experiences. Well, a little piece of your experiences. And what's the name of the movie that's coming out that you just did?
Well, we may have to change it because it's too close to an Elton John song. It's called "Someone Saved My Life."
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Someone saved my life tonight. Yeah.
We'll do an update on that if we need to.
And all I ask you is that maybe once I get to Bloomington, once I sell my house here in Denver, you take me out for your best pizza in town, or I'll take you out for.
Okay. No, you got a deal.
Okay.
You got a deal.
And when I come there to visit Tom and my sister who lives in Bloomington, I still have a lot of family there. That's my hometown.
Darren will take us all out.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
We'll go to Nick's.
We'll talk soon. Again, thank you, Angelo.
You're welcome.
Wow, that was cool. That was the best surprise guest you've come up with yet.
Oh my God. Yeah. I don't know if I can ever top that.
I love that Bob Knight story. I mean, as big of a basketball fan as I am, and yet friends with the players when I was in school and stuff, to hear that story, I literally had the goosebumps. I mean, that is you're coming with me to go see a guard up in Chicago. I mean, how cool is that?
And we could have talked another hour about, the team that we just had, got this new coach. And
I forgot to ask him what he, doing a thing about Notre Dame. I mean, that it'd be like doing a thing about Purdue. It must have been.
Oh, right. Yeah. Good point.
Well, Darren, man, it's been another fantastic episode as always. And good luck to your daughter and giving her away on Thursday, which of course would have been in the past by the time everyone sees this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tom. And as
always, later, dude.
Tom and Dee.
Two middle-aged idiots. This podcast is produced by 224 Media with voice and audio support by Fry on the Fly Productions.